What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another album review, and we got another pretty big weekend on our hands when it comes to bands we're going to be talking about, and we're going to kick the weekend off with the latest offering from Belgian death metal legends Aborted with Vault of Horrors. Comes out on March 16th, or excuse me, March 15th on Nuclear Blast Records. So this is, I believe, their first album on Nuclear Blast after spending many years with Century Media. Now they're over on Nuclear Blast. And, well, I got into Aborted courtesy of their album, The Necrotic Manifesto, which was all the way back 10 years ago. And I've listened to most of their stuff that's come out since. I even reviewed the last one, Mania Cult, when it came out in 2021, and I thought that was a really damn good album. Although it definitely signaled a bit of a shift when it comes to Aborted sound, and I think that shift is felt even more on this album. Now, I will say there are some musical subtleties going on here that definitely feel not like Aborted, but there are still some moments on here you would associate with Aborted. But the big shift on this album is in the production. This was produced by Dave Otero, who, of course, has done fantastic work with the likes of Cow Decapitation and Allegiant, and does a great job with those two bands. But with this album, I'll talk more about as we go through. So we kick things off with Dreadbringer, which immediately, once you get used to Dave Otero's production and you listen to the beginning of this song, you get like blackened tremolos and fast blast beats that almost feel like cattle decapitation to some degree. But there's some like cool dark ambience going on in the background. And also, a couple of things that I've picked up on with this album is that there's more technicality being shown on here, more angular riffs, and some more dissonant riffs. So they're seemingly spreading their wings a little bit when it comes to songwriting, when they just decide, you know what, how about we just show how complicated we can play these riffs and just go as technical as possible without being wankery. So if you were to call this a tech death album, you wouldn't be wrong, but it's not tech death in the sense of jacking off on your guitars. No, it's technical in just the fact that it just sounds challenging to play. But there's, like I said, lots of angular riffs where it's going to be really hard to figure out the phrasing and the arpeggios going on with some of these parts. But there's some, like I said, more dissonant riffs that are starting to sprinkle their way into these songs here and there. And then one thing you're going to notice, especially if you pay attention to the liner notes, every single song has a guest vocalist on it. I mainly focused on the ones that I knew, so following that would be Condemned to Rot, which this one definitely feels closer to the Aborted that I know, where it's more thrashy and there's more furious riffs. Solid grooves on here, and this features Francesco from Flesh God Apocalypse on vocals. And I will say, another thing that's kind of a big redeeming quality about this album is the guitar solos. Like, I would say 90% of this album features a lead, and for the most part, they are pretty damn solid. Like, they can be a little bit repetitive, but at the same token, they're able to showcase melody, some nice shred, and a little bit of sweeping going on, and dare I say, harmonies. Like, there's even some harmonized solos going on throughout the album. Well, maybe not throughout the album, but on a couple of tracks. But here on Condemned to Rot, the leads felt more sinister and more dark. And there's even some like thicker riffs, so it sounds like they were playing with 7-string guitars on some parts on this album. It definitely sounds like it, especially when you get towards the end of Condemned to Rot. Then we get into Brotherhood of Sleep, which this and even the following track, Death Cult, kind of start off really similar. They're both groove-oriented to start off, but with Brotherhood of Sleep, it just immediately goes into technical chaos with the riffs and the drums. There's even some occasional high-end tremolos, and dare I say, some riffs that come up here remind me a little bit of Cryptopsy. Like, there's some blast beats that make me think that, did Flo Mounier come in here and do some drum parts just out of nowhere. And it does get rather deranged at the very end. Now with Death Cult featuring Alex from Despised Icon doing the more like hardcore growls as opposed to death metal growls, and it does fit the song. And the song itself, yeah, it starts off groovy with some chugging riffs, but you also get some more Cryptopsy vibes coming in, but also a slam breakdown with Alex's vocals on top, which it does feel like it belongs more on a Despised Icon song than an Aborted song. I am going to admit that. But there's a cool, groovy chorus, but with dissonant riffs on top. Then we get to Hellbound, which features Matt from Cryptopsy doing guest vocals. Although this song doesn't feel like it'd be a Cryptopsy song. This one has some more black metal stuff going on here, like blackened tremolo melodies and blackened dissonant riffs, almost like Dark Funeral. I feel like this is like what would happen if you had death metal vocals on top of a Dark Funeral track. But it does get technical in the second half to kind of bring back more of that like tech death vibe. But there's great melodic lead and a big groove at the very end. Insect Politics, which is under 2 minutes, and this is definitely more along the lines of like early Aborted, where it was a little more grind. What am I trying to say? A little more grind inspired because of just how short it is and even some of the riffs and the beats. And it's just pissed off. But you still get some grooves later in the track. Then we get to the Golgotha, and this one kind of mixes in more of the technical play and even more dissonant riffs. But I gotta say, the drum work on this track might have been some of the best drum work in terms of like how tasteful it gets, especially at the beginning. Like, it's not just about like how fast I can play. He's like showing all these more tasteful beats and like tom patterns and such. But the song itself, yeah, it gets a little bit crazy at the end with the drums. It's definitely, arguably, the most technical song of the album. Then again, this whole album is very technically challenging in of itself. Then we get into The Shape of Hate, which lyrically, as I was reading along, all about Michael Myers, which is kind of funny. But the song itself, it's technical, but yet they're bringing in little melodies. So they're able to kind of break up the visceral onslaught this album's putting you through, or this song in particular, by incorporating little melodies and dissonance and a harmonized melodic lead section. Then we get into Natron Demonto. This definitely feels closer, again, to the Aborted I'm familiar with. It's thrashy, it's furious, but there's even some suffocation riffs that come up here on top of like a nice stomp, but you do get like tremolo progressions that are kind of more faintly in the background, and even the breakdown at the end gets atmospheric as hell. But then we get into the final track, Malevolent Haze. This was the big standout for me because it gets back to more of the familiar Aborted that I know, fast chugging riffs at the start, but it is technical again, but it's more of that Aborted that I know and love from the past decade. Dissonant melodies pop up once more, another slam breakdown, but what's unique, a clean guitar break comes up here, and it's like, nice little mood shift before it ends on a more atmospheric note with the solo at the end of this track. But now to what I was kind of let down with about this album. While I appreciate them exploring a little bit more, I feel like they may have explored a little bit too much for my taste. And this is all just my opinion. Like, I can already tell a lot of Aborted fans that have been fans of this band longer than me probably gonna dig this, which there are still some moments on here I still dug. But I feel like they kind of moved away from what I love about this band, and that's more of that, like, grindy, thrashy death metal, brutal death metal that I became accustomed to ever since I first heard this band 10 years ago. It feels like this feels more closer to, like, modern death metal, and I hate to say it, but with the production done by Dave Otero, it kind of gives this album a bit of a deathcore production. And it's like, Dave Otero, like, I like his production depending on the band. Like, Cow Decapitation, I don't mind. Same with Allegiant. But here with Aborted, you need to have grit. You need to have a little bit of filth in the guitar tone. And that definitely kind of distracted me a lot on this album was just the guitar tone itself, and even at times the mix gets a bit uneven. Like sometimes the drums are the star and the guitars are in the background. And like I said, with this tone, it kind of felt a little bit sterile and just didn't feel like an aborted guitar tone, at least to me. So it kind of took a lot of this album out, it took me away from this album a little bit. Not saying the album's bad, like, there's not really a song that I was, like, absolutely irritated by. It was, like, mostly moments within the songs that I really liked, but as far as, like, a complete song I really liked, there was only a few on here that I could probably go back and be like, you know what? Top to bottom, this was killer. So I would say about half of this album, particularly in the back half, I actually liked, whereas the front half has moments, but I wasn't quite engaged with it as I would be as the album progressed at the end, especially those last few tracks, The Shape of Hate, Natrum Demonto, and Malevolent Haze. Like, those songs definitely, while still exploring, kind of felt closer to the Aborted that I like. It's just, again, with this production, just doesn't sound like Aborted when it comes down to the sonics and the tones and everything. So overall, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. I still think it's a good, solid album for what it is. Like, I don't think there's anything terrible on this album. And like I said, there are some good songs on here, and there's no, like, straight up bad track. It's just with how the production is, it just kind of took me out of this album a little bit. But there are still some standout tracks I can probably go back to if I'm in the mood. But to me, Aborted needs to have a slightly grittier production for me to really believe that it's an Aborted album. But I will say, as I also forgot to mention, Sven's vocals, fantastic on here. But again, those are just my thoughts on this album. What did you guys think of Aborted's Vault of Horrors? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until then, peace out. Or not peace out. I'm so out of it today because I'm tired. I'm sorry. Anyways, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.